Welcome back. Time for Opinion Court. Please to get in touch with us online. Use the hashtag Opinion Court. As I mentioned earlier, we are discussing a new report released by the National Cohesion and Integration Commission, which indicates that of the country's 31 public universities, 6 ethnic communities are hogging nearly 3/4 of all jobs there. So joining us now to discuss this and the way forward, to my left is Dr. Kilemi Mwiria. He's the President's advisor on matters education, and to my right, Edward Kisiangani, our resident political analyst, who of course is also an educationist. Thank you, gentlemen, both for being here. Let me start with you, Dr. Mwiria, because it is baffling that centers of higher education, the place where you expect the enlightened to meet and to enlighten others, would be the ones who are practicing such retrogressive policies in terms of how they appoint workers. Why do you think that still is the case in 2016?
Well, you know, it's not just baffling, it's primitive, it's very backward, it's stupid actually. I keep on saying, and even when I was Minister in Education and I went to graduations, I told graduates at the university community that the only unifying factor here is not your ethnic group, it's merit. It's because you are bright that you came here, you are Luhya, you are Kalenjin, you are Maasai, so these universities are meant to be institutions where we bring the best from across the country, from across the world, irrespective of their ethnicity. And also should be reflected in leadership, because unless that is done, you can't have something completely different that students are seeing, you know, that you go to a head of department in some place in Meru, the end of department, you go to the office, the end of department, the secretary and a professor are conversing in Kimeru, and you are Maasai. I mean, it's really crazy. But I think the point is, we have sunk that far. It's really a reflection of the wider society. This is a very tribal country. People, you know, take this as the opportunity to eat from wherever they can. And if you have an institution in Meru or Kalenjin land or someplace, people say this is our own. And, you know, so it is basically really a reflection of what is happening in wider society. That unfortunately we have sunk so low to the point that we have affected even institutions where tribalism should never be an issue.
Prof.
I think I agree with the Honorable Kilemi Mwiria. We share something in common because we have once taught in the same university.
Okay.
And the crisis at public universities is much more serious than it is appearing. I think you, Honorable Kilemi Mwiria, as you are the advisor of the President on education, either you have advised the President and he doesn't want to listen, or you haven't told him the truth. The seriousness there of the problem is something that you can only imagine, but you can't describe.
What is the crisis?
The crisis is that everything, literally, the whole system, university system, is sick, almost terminally sick, and needs urgent reforms.
In what sense?
For example, in terms of management, why do we have these things of tribalism working there? You know, and in 2012, before President Kibaki moved out as our head of state, he made sure that there was what you call the Universities Act 2012. This act was passed specifically to democratize and the way things are done at universities and become transparent. So one of the things it suggested is that the councils which had been existing before that act and which were politically appointed to serve certain ethnic interests should be dissolved, so that new councils that are elected competitively can come. Up to this time, and we are talking about, the government, the Jubilee government, has not recruited new councils. He knows I'm saying the truth. Now, these councils are still living in the past, where when you are appointed on the council, you bring in 5, 10 people from your community. And even the people who propose you are likely to be from your community. So when you look at the problem in the universities, it's a fact that the universities first looks over the fence what is happening in the bigger picture that he's raising. The fact that the same statistics you are seeing, which says that 6 communities dominate jobs in public universities, public service reports that have come out since 2013 have also indicated that the same 6 communities dominate jobs in the public service.
Yeah, but
so the point that you need to do is the healing process to deal with this problem begins with government.
Yes.
And then when the universities look over the fence and see that the same changes have taken place in government, they can now say, we cannot do what government does not approve. But now, if
and you think the problem lies with the fact that councils have not been changed?
Yeah, I want to correct him. And since 2012, there has been an effort by government to ensure that councils are not dominated by the communities where universities are located. This has been the case, and when they have new councils, that's what is happening. The problem right now with all the councils has nothing to do with that fact. Is that it's been recommended that even council members be recruited competitively as opposed to politicians suggesting names. So someone went to court, or Mutata went to court, so the process stopped. But actually, even the Moi University Council is quite mixed. It's very balanced. And there has been, that attempt has been there. In fact, part of the reform that we engaged in when we were still in the Ministry of Higher Education was to insist that a chairman of University Council must not come from the same ethnic group as where the university is located, and that's a case across the country. So there, it's not just about councils.
Let me bring in a part of the report that perhaps not controversial, but it is something that is difficult to. It's hardly palatable. The study also notes that people from certain communities are more likely to have higher academic qualifications than others, meaning that they are more likely to hold certain jobs more than others. What does that, Prof, speak to? A history of, skewed resources, skewed opportunities, so that there's only a certain group that emerges as educated or elite, or perhaps are these excuses that we're still hiding behind in 2016?
You see, the observation is quite correct, and that's why I said that the problem begins, everything stops with government. We know that because of certain imbalances which are historical, some of them are colonial. Certain communities were left behind, and therefore if you told them to raise the correct number of people to work in the universities, they may not have, because there are certain jobs, especially the teaching jobs, which you cannot give anybody unless they qualify. But when you go to the universities and check where the problem lies, in fact the problem is not so much about the teaching staff, because the teaching staff have certain qualifications they should meet. In fact, the complaint of the teaching staff is on not just on how many people are in the university from a particular community, but how many have been promoted to the next stage. In fact, it's at promotion level that ethnicity is comes up for the teaching staff. But for the non-teaching staff, who are actually the majority in the universities, who are administrators, clerks, and other kind of things, these are the people that dominate this area, because I think you can find them very easily, and you can replace them very easily. So these are the people who come from this kind of area. So what you really require is this. Government should have a policy where it can now look at all the communities of Kenya, and it is contained in the constitution under Article 10. How can we do regional parliamenting? Is there any positive affirmative action we can do to make sure that the Turkana have, even on an interview day, they have enough people to compete? If people will tell you they are thinking about it in government, but we are not seeing about it.
Let me pick up on that. Sorry, I beg your pardon before you respond, because we have had on a similar discussion on this program with from the public service, an official basically arguing and saying that this can only be done progressively, that affirmative action to allow, to change how civil service staffing looks will only take time, and so you're phasing it out and saying over the next 10 years we want to see this sort of increment. Is there such policy in government that is effective in terms of education?
Yes. First, let me go back to the point about these imbalances. It is not unexpected that the communities that dominate our universities are Luyas, Kikuyus, Luos, and others. The same usual suspects. In the case of education, the reason is clear. If you go back historically, the places that the missionaries came to in the 1900s, it was in Luoland, it was in Western Kenya, it was in parts of Eastern Province and Central Kenya. So these were the first to be exposed to formal education, and with that, they went to universities, got degrees, got PhDs, and the Tomboya airlifts took in a lot of other Kenyans. So that's historical. But what government has been doing also is paying particular attention to what can be done to redress those imbalances. For example, there's a disproportionate amount of money going to the arid and semi-arid areas to ensure that we uplift them. There are boarding primary schools which is not the case elsewhere. When you recruit teachers for training, originally it was with lower grades, so there's an effort. And even the effort of taking institutions at universities closer to the people is to ensure that originally marginalized communities also have a chance, because you bring universities closer, you can day universities and so on. So that is being done at that level. And in fact, there has been a lot of a lot of concern about what is it that can be done in universities. My own recommendation, both for universities and the civil service, is that we need to have a data bank. We need to have a data bank that lists all the people that are employed in this country by position and ethnic group. We can call that hate speech, because by not talking it, you are not addressing the problem. So we look at that, and we look at the same at the universities and ask questions about so that when there are other vacancies that are available, we will then look around, and when we are interviewing, and ask the Turkana, the Maasai, the Kalenjins are not represented. So we give them the first opportunity. It will take time. Remember, employment...
But sir, if I beg your pardon, because we're talking about something that has actually been debated, and I don't know, Prof, if you will recall, by the head of public service on this program, yes, saying specifically that government has gone out of its way to enact policy, yes, that will see a phased change of the way, yes, the civil service looks like. And what I'm asking specifically is, what is the plan in terms of education? What are you advising the president? Are you telling him that between 2017 and 2020 that we should have seen so many more ethnic communities join the service in terms of education? Is there an actual plan in place?
Yeah, first of all, I had something that I'll come back to you, but I just wanted to point out something so that it doesn't get lost. The question is, the kind of tribalism or ethnic discrimination that we are talking about is not exactly what Anne is asking. Anne is talking about areas that were marginalized because historically some people are still below there. They will not raise enough manpower even to work in the universities. Mm-hmm. But the one we are talking about is where, for example, you go to a university like Kibabii from Western, which has been shown on the news. It has probably over 80% of people from the locality. But when you go to Kirinyaga, you don't find the same people. They qualify to work at Kibabii, but they don't seem to qualify to work in Kirinyaga. So you have qualified...
They don't cross counties.
They don't cross counties. So this is the deliberate thing we are talking about. Why would you find that there are more people from the locality, especially more university from the Kalenjin community, but then you don't find enough Kalenjins in Karatina University?
But Prophet could come. It's not the question. Conversely, Prof, I beg your pardon, yes, conversely could also be argued that people simply want to work close to home, that they don't want to necessarily
the reason why I'm pointing out that, Anne, is because some people have even argued in the past. If you ask those who go for interviews, they are even asked questions like, this one doesn't belong to you, so why did you come for interview here? The interview is already decided. They are going to
we'll get to that. We'll get to that one. But first, let me return you to my question on policy.
Yes.
Is there actually structured policy to ensure change, or is this just something that we keep hearing about on talk shows with no real game plan?
Yes, I'll tell you, at the university, in fact, beginning in 2012, that's the first time government conducted an audit of our universities. Then there were 22. And there was a big meeting in Naivasha, if I remember correctly. Then university spoke and they gave us their numbers. And from then on, the Commission for University Education and the Ministry of Higher Education decided to begin to have to put in place policies that will redress these kinds of imbalances. It started with addressing the senior management of universities to ensure that there is a balance. And these questions are being asked. It's the same with the university councils. Those questions are being asked. But more importantly, also in terms of looking at the spectrum of the representation of academic staff members, and especially academic staff members. Now, what the problem is with regard to the support and non-skilled staff. For example, at more universities, out of 4,000 staff members, only 1,000 are academic staff members. And out of those 4,000, 1,200 are casual laborers waiting to be employed. This is where the problem is. And that one, this is where people are craving to be vice chancellors in their respective communities, because in a sense the policy allows for those lower cadres to employ locals. It makes sense. It makes sense.
But
then they overemploy. They overemploy, so it becomes a cash cow. It's an opportunity.
And I hear what you're saying. I think, would you agree that sometimes the challenge with government policy is that it's not timed? There's no date on which you're holding yourselves accountable, that by this time we're going to return to the policy that we have indicated and see were we successful or not. It's always left open, you know, with some
I think
no deadline.
I think we should have benchmarks.
Exactly.
The question is checking whether or not those benchmarks are being respected. And, you know, being asked these questions by the National Cohesion Commission, I think it's important. I mean, you know, we were asked in 2012, we are being asked again, and I think we all begin to, you know, to look for ways of ensuring that we address this issue. But we need support. You see, I want to go back to this. You know, the problem is not just government. The problem of ethnicity in universities is a lot more about politicians. It's about more politicians. So we have to find a way of, you know, making it clear to politicians who don't seem to know that universities are about the country, are about the world. They are not about their own ethnic communities. Because there have been cases where, you know, politicians have said, we have a university in Kisii. If it's not a Kisii Vice Chancellor, forget it.
Here's an argument that the Mandango camp has actually put forward. Fair enough, sir. And Prof, I want to come to you because it's talking about the role of politicians in it. And they have basically argued that if top national and county jobs are reserved for locals, then why shouldn't the VC post be reserved for locals as well, in as far as, you know, promoting local talent? What do you think of that argument?
You see, if you look at the current constitution, that's where we begin. There are certain things. Higher education is under the schedule of government. They are under central government. Yes. So you cannot take Kenya Ports Authority and say it belongs to the community. So universities similarly are products of the national government. So everybody should go there. Now, and even if people come up with policies that don't have benchmarks, the most important thing everybody who sits in a public office in this country to ask is, am I following the constitution? Some of the parts of the constitution had benchmarks. For example, the Article 10 of the constitution that talks about national values of governance. These national values of governance were not given in fact they started working immediately we passed the 2010 constitution, so you don't need a benchmark. Then secondly, Article 27 of the constitution, which talks about non-discrimination, also started working. The Bill of Rights started working immediately, and it was supposed to be implemented. So even if you don't have a policy in the government and you sit in an office and you start calling in your villagers to come and do jobs that they don't qualify, spend money on some people because you really think they come from your area, even they don't have something to do. That is how we are losing resources. So even if we don't have a policy, and I think I request Honorable Kilemi, I think you need to tell the President that it is up to the executive to tell universities to follow the constitution. That you have had 7 years, almost 7 years of the constitution. You don't need a policy. Go and check the constitution, which is the supreme law of the land. When you implement it, you will be doing.
Do they need an incentive, perhaps? For instance, the Exchequer denying them, you know, not being able to draw from the Exchequer unless they actually meet the requirements.
Conditions.
That could be one of the things.
I think that could be one of the things, but I just want to go back to the point that we made about universities and vice chancellors. Support staff can come from the local community because I think it makes a little bit more sense given what they are making and so on. But the university is a national institution. And when Mandago, for example, the governor of Nandi, says that, you know, we want one of our... Uasin Gishu. He says we want one of our own, we want a Nandi in here. You have to ask the question, what does he mean by our own? Must it be a Nandi? He was elected by Luyas, by Luos, by Kikuyus. That county belongs to you know, I mean, every ethnic group is represented. Secondly, universities are not devolved. They are national function precisely because these are agents of national unity. This is why we take our best brains wherever they come from. So there is that misunderstanding. And we need to also come out strongly and say no to politicians, because one of the biggest problems, apart from talking to universities, the president can work through the university councils. They're independent. And, you know, you elect people who understand what university is about. Now we have raised, you know, to be a member of university council, you have to have a master's degree. To be a chairman of council, you have to have a PhD, you know, for example. So, I mean, these are improvements. And you would imagine these kinds of people will do a job without waiting for the president to do it. What the president has to do, being a politician, and and those of us who are politicians, is to begin to educate politicians about what universities are about. And just to say that you can be tribal about a lot of other things. We do not agree with tribalism, but at least don't touch universities, because when you have a crisis like at Moi University and you come back and you are received like a hero, what are students from Luyaland, from Meru, from the coast, what are they supposed to do?
What is this cheap political expediency that perhaps the governor was looking for? Look, we're going into an election cycle.
You see, Mandago,
popular for the people?
Mandago is not the only, governor who might have talked things similar to that. There are other governors who have made similar mistakes. But now you look at the other institution, when a governor talks like Mandago did, what is supposed to be done and who is supposed to do it?
What should be done and who
what should be done is that there must be an organ like the police now and the CID who know that somebody has violated the constitution. The institutions we have in this country do not punish people enough when they violate this constitution.
Yeah, it's not enough for the National Cohesion Commission to happen,
but we must
interview them. These guys should be arrested.
They must be arrested.
Why should you wait?
Secondly, you will see the same Mandago being cleared during the next general election to run. And we know very well that he has violated the constitution by talking the way he talked. So I think the executive and the parliament should give
the criminal is what you're saying.
Yes, so that we say this guy comes from my village, but what he's saying is against the constitution, and I will stand with the constitution and disown him.
And what Mandago is saying, look here, he is saying, look, this is Nandi country.
You don't come here.
We have to be Nandis, but we are also saying, therefore, Nandi should not get out of Eldoret.
You're equally denying
them chances. And remember, even Nandi, I'm going to produce a presidential candidate 2022. Mandago is saying, that the rest of the Kenyans should not.
We shouldn't vote for our presidential candidate from the Nandi.
And I hope that as we continue in these conversations, and unfortunately this sort of thing is what we are likely to hear as we draw closer to a general election, that some sober minds can prevail over it. The country belongs to all of us, and certainly to all public institutions. I thank you, gentlemen, for your time. We're taking a short break on Opinion Court. We'll be back with the business news after this. Stay with us.